Hello, Tom.
Hi, Dudley. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Welcome to the show today. We've just gone live and see you popped in just in time.
That's the way I like it.
That's where you like it. Everything on the edge, on the edge.
Exactly.
Yeah, Tom, welcome. So I just want to welcome you and the audience and everyone who's tuned in, maybe even today or watching a recording of the show. This is the podcast for marketing leadership. So we focus a lot on, I would say, the expertise in the industry around marketing, branding, and all about the growth and development. I think the frontline people that deal with customers, or even at least the communication with clients, customers, patients, if you're probably doctor, and so on. Anybody, or investors, if you're a fund manager. So anybody who is involved in communicating, this is the podcast for you. And the content we cover many aspects around, I would say, the key things within the marketing industry. Today we've got Thom Lant. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm really
Pleasure to be
looking
here.
forward to our conversation because I think there's a whole host of things that we haven't actually seen on the podcast before that you're going to bring today to the conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it. But instead of me giving you an intro, Thom, and we had a really good discussion some days back before the podcast, and if you don't mind sharing some of those things with me and the audience as well. Tell us a bit about you, your sort of your journey into how did you get to where you are right now?
Sure. So I'm Thom Lant. At the moment, I work as a brand communications and marketing consultant, and that's predominantly in financial markets, financial services, and commodities and natural resources. My journey in marketing really started at university. And I took a degree there. And then when I left, I got involved in the commodities business and really enjoyed that space. And my first introduction into kind of the financial markets was with the London Metal Exchange, where I was fortunate enough to get a job. I walked in the first day to do an interview, and as you walked up to the offices, there is a trading floor, like the old-fashioned one, with people sitting around in a ring, shouting and screaming at each other. When I first went there, I didn't have a clue what they were saying, why they were doing it. But as soon as I saw that, it really kind of lit something in me. Probably from the age of 6, when we went through the Big Bang in the UK with financial services, I'd seen people on TV, brokers, and shouting into phones and stuff. And ever since then, I wanted to work in financial markets. But as I got a little bit older, I realized that I didn't have the aptitude for maths that a trader needs to have. And so I studied marketing. But I really wanted to work in the city, and this job gave me the opportunity. And I was there to do communications and marketing for them across their suite of products. And LME, the London Metal Exchange, is known globally as the central point where people manage price risk for base metals and some other types of metals and commodities. And taking that opportunity, getting to work with traders, getting to go onto a real trading floor and market for that type of business. It's a 140-year-old brand. So it has a significant amount of brand equity and brand history in it. And in the period of time I was there, we actually went through the financial crisis, and most notably the default of Lehman Brothers. And that day, I actually on the Sunday evening, I got a call from a journalist that I used to work with there, and they told me that Lehman's probably wasn't going to make their margin calls when the Asian markets opened on the Monday. So I got in the office nice and early, and as soon as the market opened, Lehman's was in default. You could see on the TV people leaving the offices with boxes. The market was going crazy, as you would expect, as people adjust their positions and want to know what's going on. And a lot of calls from journalists. So a lot of intense pressure during that first significant bit. By the time it got to midday, the calls had kind of died off. And so I went down on the trading floor, took the opportunity to get down there, and it was the aluminium ring. And usually on the trading floor, they execute, tens of lots. And someone stood up and they said, "I've got 5,000 lots." And the whole trading floor just went dead silent. I mean, that was at the time was probably near on about a few $1 billion worth of aluminium. And then someone got up and went, "I'll take 2,000 of that." And then the whole floor just erupted in a way I'd never seen before. And it was an amazing experience to be there on the floor at that time in such a significant moment for financial markets, kind of a generational thing. It was very instructive from a PR point of view, crisis communications and how you handle those type of things and that type of pressure. I was well prepared for it. There'd been some issues with other banks like Bear Stearns earlier that had been bought by other institutions. So I was ready for that and managed that. But the important point was, from what was a crisis, it gave the opportunity to do some marketing off the back of that about what exchanges are for, price risk management, exactly these types of situations where volatility is high. That's why exchanges are here, and that's why they're important with their clearing houses. And we did some really nice marketing off of the back of that. And it taught me early in my career, even in the biggest crises, there's opportunities. If you're a savvy marketer, savvy communicator, there's opportunities come out of that. And if you take them, then you can do well and come out the other side. And I think that's particularly important at the moment as we're heading into probably the most significant recession in the UK, perhaps ever, certainly for a very long time. A lot of marketers at the moment are cutting their budgets, or the businesses they work in are cutting their budgets. I think that's a huge mistake. And I'm not saying that as a marketer, I'm saying that as with a commercial hat on. All the evidence you will find supports that if marketers maintain or increase their budgets during a downturn, they will come out of the downturn faster and in a better position than their peers who don't do that, who cut budgets. And there's an argument that if we can't close any sales, what's the point in doing any marketing? But the argument there is, look, marketing's about two things. It's about long-term brand building, and it's about short-term sales activation. If you don't think you're going to close any sales, don't do that work. Put that money into your long-term brand building and make sure when you come out of that downturn, when the markets pick up as they inevitably will, that you're best positioned, you're top of mind with your customers or potential customers, and they're ready to work with you again, invest with you again. And I think that's a really critical point and lesson, particularly in the current time. It is a bit like 2008. We know we're heading into a big recession. We know it's going to be very difficult. But as a business and B2B marketing, you really should be doubling down on your spend, and you'll come out better.
Yeah, but Thom, I want to pose a bit of a challenge, because if you think how companies are battered from, this is not by any means a show around politics or anything like that. But obviously, politics does influence business. Decisions influence business, and I think for me, my observation again is really that the jury is still out. If you think the impact of Brexit, for instance, whether Brexit's good or bad, that we probably see in the long term, probably more so than in the short term. But the fact that they took so long to decide, and there's been uncertainty in the market, I would say, for many, many years, from 2016, 2017, and the indecision has been incredible for the last 5 years, if you think about politics, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Then we went into lockdown. Everything has been uncertain. I think business doesn't like uncertainty.
Absolutely.
And going into a downturn, it's not as if we've had everything rosy up until this point.
Yeah.
We've literally come off the back of this uncertainty. People are exhausted, I think, in terms of all these chops and changes. I mean, we go through prime ministers in this country like, people eat McDonald's, I think. It's quite crazy. And I think, just policy decisions just change.
Yeah.
You don't know if the interest rates are going up, if they're going down. You don't know where your customers are going to be next week, next year. And this is the difficulty in what I also see as a massive market shift, because who was your customer 5 and 10 years ago, or your client, or as I said, your fund your investor, patient, or if you're in the medical industry. I mean, if you think that, things have changed, they have changed, and your market fundamentally, how people buy, not just that they're under pressure, but what they buy, why they buy it, even the what we assumed were things 5 and 10 years ago. Commodities were commodities 10 years ago. And yes, I mean the financial crisis and all that, yes, we can understand that was a specific, very definable event. But here we've had storms and hurricanes. I mean, just tell me your view. And I've just painted this bleakest picture possible. Do marketing companies and marketing individuals and companies that are trying to do marketing, do they still have any dry powder left? I mean, you're talking about spending money or investing in the downturn, but do people have the mental energy or even the financial capacity to be pushing very, very hard?
Yeah, so I mean that's good questions, and we are in an extraordinary time. I make no mistake about that. But we have had extraordinary times before. I think as a marketer, you naturally have to deal with ambiguity constantly. As much as we like to measure things, as much as we can, ultimately you're dealing with people or groups of people, and they can be irrational, they can be emotional. So you have to get used to dealing with ambiguity. There's not always answers to the questions you'd like answers to. So as a marketer, you have to deal with that. What I think is, in terms of what's taken place, is as a brand, as an organization, you have to be part of the continuity, and that doesn't exist when those macro factors are flying around and are so uncertain. Then you have to show some consistency and some certainty in yourself as an organization, and I think that's really important. I think when people went through the pandemic and lockdown, if you watched what, as a kind of side story, if you watched what they were looking on TV, on YouTube and things like that, they were going back to things they've watched in more certain times, things when they were younger, things that give them comfort. And I think that's important. And I think it's important you bring that into marketing and in B2B. I mean, let's face it, I see this a lot in B2B with clients. They talk about, everything in rational, factual terms. People don't turn into robots when they walk into an office. They're still emotional beings, and they're still triggered by emotions. And that's really important. And I think when things are irrational in the outside world, then that's more so the case. And you have to communicate at that level. And let me just separate a couple of things out about what I just said before. Long-term brand building is more about emotional priming. It's about a longer-term focus. It's not the short term of marketing where you're trying to use rational, persuasive messages to get them to buy something now. It's about building long-term brand equity. And ultimately, when you do that, when you have short-term with it, it makes it more effective. But if you can't short-term market in the short term, then when you do switch that short-term back on, you're going to be top of mind, and your short-term marketing will be far more effective. Now, the question you asked is, have they got any powder and is it still dry? Well, you have to. I mean, what's the alternative? That you stop communicating with your customers? you stop investing in your brand, you withdraw from that. If you do that, I would argue that you're going to cease to become a business in however many months, years, or decades it takes, but you will lose out. And if you look at the data from marketing through recessions, from different sectors, the data always tells you the same. People who withdraw their spend will find out that they lose out, and it has a long-term impact, particularly around brand building. If you can continue to increase your spend, if you have that budget, then I would encourage you do, because you're going to come out the blocks much faster. If you don't, try and reallocate it. Spend less on your short term. Why would you do lots of digital campaigns that last 2 months when actually no one's going to buy off you? You need to tone that down and put more into your long-term brand building. You know, those more emotive messages, building up brand equity. And that has many aspects. It makes your short-term marketing more effective when you do it, but it has an incremental effect on the intangibles of your valuation. And if you look at valuations over the last 50 years, what you'll see, company valuations on the S&P 500, the tangible asset percentage of a valuation has gone down significantly, and the intangible assets have gone up significantly. And a significant part of those intangible assets is brand equity. Of course, you have things like patents, trademarks, copyrights, they all make part of it, but a significant part of that is brand equity. And if you don't invest in your brands, if you're a scale up, you're going to lose out. If you want to go for funding, you're going to lose out. If you want to IPO, you're going to lose out, because you're not going to get the valuation you could do if you'd spent that time and effort investing in that brand. And let me make something clear, because this is often a misconception in marketing, is it's not all about the long-term brand building in marketing. It's not all about the short-term in marketing. It's about doing them both together in the right ratio. If you don't do them both together in the right ratio, what you'll find is your profitability, your sales, your profitability will be less. And ultimately, your valuation will not be what it could be. So to give you some numbers, if you just did long-term brand building exclusively, the effect on your profitability would be about 20%. If you just did short-term sales activation, digital campaigns, stuff like that last a couple of months, if you just did that exclusively, your profitability increase would be around 15-18%. If you do them both together in the correct ratio, your profitability would be, the profitability effect would be 25%. So you're talking about leaving 25% if you just do brand building, or 33% on the table if you're not doing both of those together in the correct ratio. And we can talk about the ratios if you want to, what that looks like for different businesses, but that's the kind of impact you have. I would say the more uncertain the market is, you know, be creative in your marketing about the messages you deliver and how you do it. Clearly, it doesn't make any sense asking people to buy when they're not in a position to buy. But there are other messages that you can use more around long-term brand building that help your brand in the long term when you come out the other side. And inevitably, it always ends, recessions end, whether it's a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month, it's going to be over at some point. The important thing is when you come out of that, you can get back to where you were quickly and move ahead of your competition. I think that's really key.
Yeah. So, but I think there's for me, and I'd like your view on this. And you know, if you're working with very, very large entities, and depending which sectors you work in, you could be in sectors that are in cash plus. You know, the bank accounts are overflowing purely because they're on the right end, the right side of the, let's call it this, the energy crisis. On the flip side, you have companies that had to shut down, etc., and so on. And I mean, I'm just taking, you know, for instance, I mean, I heard the other day, and I could be wrong, and you know, a company like Boots, for instance, what do? You know, they are on the high street. Everybody knows it. It's got a very loyal customer base. What does a company like Boots do as opposed to, you know, the footfall might be the same, but people are spending less, they're buying smaller items. Any amount of brand building is not necessarily going to help you short or long term in that respect. I mean, I'm just giving you sort of a case study. I want to throw it at you and just see what comes back.
Yeah. So I would argue definitely with someone like Boots. And again, when you look at long-term brand building, we're not talking about, we're not talking sub 12 months. We're talking 1, 2, 3 years here. And if you look at the data behind that, there's some marketing folks called Les Burnett and Peter Field, and they've done some phenomenal work on marketing, looking at the ratios you use, and the data they use is 30 years of real data. It's not theoretical, it's real on companies like Boots, and they've done work through recessions and things like that. And what you see is that brand building is incremental. It's not straight up. If you use sales activation, what you find is it goes straight up and you'll generate more sales. But when you turn it off, it goes straight down. There's no incremental effect. With brand building, it's incremental like this, and it's going up over time. So if you are in a recession like Boots, people aren't going to buy from you necessarily in as much in that time period. They'll still buy from you. There's still, goods that they have to have, and they will still buy them. And you could talk about offering value at that time, trying to keep prices reasonable. I would never advise people to discount prices. I think, if you have a strong brand, you command pricing power, and that's part of building the brand, is you have that. But you're looking for that long-term effect. So when you do come out of that recession, when you do come out of that downturn, you've maintained your customers, and you've probably attracted some new customers. Long-term brand building is not about targeting existing customers. It actually works better with new customers. And any marketer worth their salt will tell you, yes, existing customers are important, but if you want to grow, you want to create more sales and build value in your brand, you have to bring in new customers too. And new customers who are exposed. So if you take a broad view, mass market targeting, so you're targeting the entire segment, you're not looking at who might be ready to buy now, you're building salience with them. So your brand's top of mind. So take Boots, for instance. If I'm spending more on my brand building and building loyalty than Superdrug, then it's more likely when we come out of that recession, someone's going to walk into my shop that's Boots, and they ain't going to go to Superdrug. And that's the advantage I've gained myself. Okay, and that's what you're building up in time. Again, with something like Boots, shopping habits change. So, in the pandemic, you couldn't go into the store. So you have to make sure that you've got avenues where they can still buy, and you can still service them if that's possible. If it's not, again, brand building doesn't have to be about buying products at that specific time. It's about introducing your brand to people, building salience in their mind. So when they do make a buying decision, then you're top of mind. You've earned trust, understanding, and that counts for a lot, particularly when you switch that sales activation back on, because what you find is when you do both together, then your profitability is much higher. So absolutely take your point. And for some businesses, it will be difficult to maintain spending. But again, it's about talking to CFOs and showing them the evidence, showing them the facts, showing them projections. Like I said before, marketing is about ambiguity. You're dealing with ambiguity all the time. Be very clear with the CFO. Look, these are the past results. These are projections. Be very honest in it. When you approach them, have an honest discussion and go in there and show them the evidence that has been collected over decades of companies like yours and in similar segments or different segments, and have a realistic conversation about it. And if the money's not there, then you need to look at how you're going to switch. But trying to maintain a presence is really important, because if you don't do that, then you are condemning yourself. Okay, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
You're almost damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
I think in the long term, you'll come out of it a lot better.
Yeah, but you got to survive. You got to survive in the short term. So not all companies cannot do that. So I'm just posing a different type of question. So let's just go into maybe just from your experience. I'm really keen to know, if you had to define sort of brand building and what are the activities around that? I mean, what does that really mean? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you just have to do some research on Google and wherever, or even, I think they even teach it at the universities, but I don't even know if it's completely outdated now. And so, I mean, tell us about what is the modern day version of brand building?
Yeah, so before I get to that, let me give you a bit of context. Look, marketing as a profession hasn't been particularly good at selling or explaining itself, I would say. And part of the reason for that is, if you look at your average marketer, I can tell you 50% of them have no education in marketing. None. Or any high quality training. And so why do we find ourselves in the way we are with marketing? Is because if people don't have an education in a topic that has a lot of moving parts, where there's a lot of ambiguity as well as science, then how could they possibly understand what marketing is? And then how could they possibly educate the rest of the people in the company? So if I go and pick up your average MBA book that your CEO or CFO might have had a look at, they'll talk about marketing strategy. People like Michael Porter's 5 Forces, Philip Kotler, things like that. And yes, they'll talk a bit about brand, but not in depth. So there's a problem that sits within marketing around education, and then that leads into how it's discussed in businesses. If I was to talk about long-term brand building, what's that? So long-term brand building to me is something that is at least over a year, that goes on for a longer period of time. It's strategic in its nature. It influences future sales. It's not there to get them straight away. It's about emotional priming, even in B2B, using those emotional levers. So a famous advert from the 1970s from IBM, I think it's probably the greatest example of emotional priming, is IBM started to get more competitors. So they ran a campaign, and basically the campaign was, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. And that's a massive emotional primer, right? Oh yeah, you can go with the newer, cheaper competitor, but by the way, if it doesn't work out because you don't know them very well, because you don't know their brand, then you're probably going to get fired. That for me was pure genius, and it still is today. You see that in MBA books. People still talk about that line today because it was so effective. So that long-term brand building, it creates brand focus. It's not product focused. It's about the brand. Okay, it's not about the product. It's about the brand. And then it creates brand equity. So all the things I was talking about before, brand being top of mind. So if I was to say to you, give me a couple of names of mobile phones, you're going to say Apple and probably Samsung, I would say. And that leads into a very good example of why brand really matters. So when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, it wasn't doing very well. And one of the first things he did was bring his old agency in and really focus on 3 things. And people don't have a lot of mental availability. Marketers or poorly trained marketers think that customers must think about their brand all the time. They don't. Most people hold in their head 2, 3, maybe 4 things about a brand. That's something I call brand codes. If you get those things right and you use them in everything you do as a marketer, as a brand, then it resonates. Take Apple as an example. For every $1 Apple spends, they make $29. Okay? But they only have maybe a quarter of the smartphone market. Samsung's the biggest smartphone manufacturer in the world, but they haven't done a particularly good job with their brand as well as Apple has. They're still brilliant, don't get me wrong, but for every $1 they spend, they make 15. Now, if you take what I said before, that most companies are valued on their intangible assets now, and brand equity being a significant part of that, I think that speaks volume about the importance of brand. So in a nutshell, brand's about getting people to remember and recall your brand in favorable terms. It's a longer term focus. It's about the brand, not the product. And it's about creating brand equity.
I think you've nailed it. And however, if I just think about the examples you've just shared now, for me, it's I don't know if you recall Sony, for instance, as an example.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring up Samsung, and where Sony went off the rails was they started a prolific product creation. You know, you could get Sony in any kind of electronic goods, and it became so confusing as to what model. The parts, the models would get old very quickly. You couldn't get spares. You couldn't get anybody to fix it. You had to throw it away. And that's a lot more to do with narrowing a focus, with making sure you understand your customer, your market. Yeah. And then in addition to that is probably a lot more to do with quality delivery and being very, very focused. And if I look at let's take a McDonald's compared to some of the other, other types of brands out there. McDonald's have kept it simple. You know, they keep their menu simple. They don't confuse it. Yeah. Apple have got, I don't know, 5 products. If you think about it, they've got the desktop, they've got the laptop, they've got the tablet, and they've got the phone. You know, and they got a few little gadgets, and a watch, I think. Yeah. But they haven't gone and built washing machines and tumble dryers and whatever, TVs and so on. And I think what Samsung has done wrong, and I think they dilute their actual brand by trying to get into too many spaces. And so, like, if you say, what is Samsung? It's like, I'm not so sure. Is it really a phone company? Yeah. It's a bit like, for me, brand is a problem. I think if I can remember the term now, but there was this one study I saw, and I don't know how true this is, but just as an example, it's called preemptive advantage. Mm-hmm. It's like, what space do you occupy in the mind of your customer? What's that hook? Because once the hook is formed, that's it. So preemptive advantage, as an example, is and again, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but potatoes have more vitamin C than oranges. Okay, but oranges have the preemptive advantage. They got the hook.
Yeah.
As in, orange juice is better for you because, or having a fresh orange or whatever has got more vitamin C. But in fact, potatoes have far more vitamin C than orange. As an example, I don't know if this is true or not, but that's the preemptive advantage. In no ways, if you go and try and do brand building around potatoes with a high vitamin C content, people are going to say, what? Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? And this is the confusion, I think, when it comes to brand building, is you've got to get the message resonating with where the mind of the customer is.
Absolutely, and you're right on there. So there's a couple of things in there. I mean, first of all, like I said before, people's mental availability of what they keep in their head about a brand is very small. So you have to keep it, tight, and that's why Apple have 3. And then I think what is also very important is how you structure your organizations. And a lot of the clients I work, when I go into them in B2B, often what they have is they have some products that they've tried to turn into brands, but the name of the company has kind of moved to one side, and that creates a problem, because if you're a small company, if you're a B2B company, you don't have the internal resources. If you've got a marketing department with 6, 7, 8, 10 people in it, they can't manage a stable of brands. So the architecture of your brand and your products is fundamentally wrong. And I suppose you could argue that point with the example you gave of Samsung. Have they got that wrong? Are they trying to be a branded house when actually they should be a house of brands? But you have to resource and get that right. Whereas if you look at someone like Procter and Gamble, I mean, they are the greatest example of brilliant marketing and being a house of brands. You know, Procter and Gamble, not so well known, but you know all their brands, right? We use them every day. And that's the way they structure themselves. So I think, you know, what we're talking about here is really kind of a brand architecture, business structure thing. And I take your point on something like Samsung, that maybe is an issue for them. And I think when you look at that business, you know, if you create a bad washing machine, then there's an impact on your brand if you're a branded house. And then people are going to take that to your phone. So yeah, there is going to be an impact. And then, you know, as a CMO sitting with the executive team and the board, you really need to think about how you structure your brand architecture. And what I see a lot of in B2Bs is, yes, they've built up products into brands. And what they realize down the road is, I call it IBM syndrome, taken from that IBM advert I give the example of before, is they're like perpetual startups who've been doing short-term marketing all the time. And actually, people know their products, but nobody knows their brands. They've built no brand equity. So what happens is 10, 15, 20 years down the line is you start losing out to brands that are more well-known who've built their brand equity. You've got as much as you can out of your existing customers because that's where short-term marketing works best, with existing customers. But you haven't brought any new customers. You haven't filled the hopper up and brought them through, and you start losing out. You haven't built their brand equity, and it creates a problem, and they've got their brand architecture wrong. And all these things come together. Marketing, brand is a sum of all parts. And you've got to make sure you get those parts right like a cake, because if you don't, you're going to have, whatever you bake is not going to be very nice. And the value of it won't be very good either.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of merit in that. I think what you call architecture, and that's why for me, marketing is not a bunch of sort of people sitting over there. You know, they just need to spin out sort of some social media posts and just sort of get stuff out there. But we too busy in operations to get involved in that. And for me, marketing is in looking at marketing leadership, because I mean, this podcast is about marketing leadership. Yeah, it is a key element of strategy. It's a key element in terms of structuring your organization, in terms of operations. If you look at the proliferation, or let's say of warehousing, especially if you look, people are buying from home now. I mean, if you're from a consumer base, and if you look at that, you know, those massive retail parks, for instance, that they built at one stage. I mean, everywhere they were popping up. Was sort of, they were called destination stores, if you like. And then you would go there and spend the day there because there were multiple stores in a space. And then we had obviously lockdown, and our behaviors have changed. I mean, even for me, I don't necessarily want to be leaving home. I mean, look at the view. But, you know, why would I spend my life in a retail park? You know, why don't I just get online and order something? But I want to come back to that sort of structural thing, because I think where I think there's a gap, and I want to try and make this as practical as possible, because one can be very theoretical about these things. Let's turn it a bit more practical. And I want to encourage anybody listening, if you're a sort of a small or medium-sized enterprise as opposed to a large enterprise, and you're thinking through your strategy, let's say for 2023. I mean, this is we coming to the end of 2022. It's been all over the place, quite frankly. I don't even know how people how they go from one week to the next. But you look at 2023, you say, okay, what do I need to do differently, better? How do I get better in terms of my brand building, my brand marketing? And I think brand spend is not necessarily just a communication message out there, but for me, brand spend, if you like, should be internal within organizations as well. It's sort of getting everyone together, from the people at the front desk all the way through into finance, operations, the delivery people that, you know, deliver goods. If you're in a product-based business or a service-based business and you do deliver projects or something like that, get everyone together and everyone agree that there should be a consistency in the customer journey through our business. We should rather take on fewer, higher quality customers, as an example, but treat them in a consistent manner at a very high quality would be, for me, a much better investment in this time that we're in. This is the time not to cut costs, but this is a time to improve the consistency of delivery, because the worst thing you can do is have a great brand message out there. I mean, I don't really want to do this, but I mean, I want to take a name. I mean, let's take let's take a politician. And I'm going to say, look, you can go and do, I mean, just pop a politician in your head. I don't want to name names. So, and you go and you say, okay, I'm this politician, let's say, and I want somebody to go and run a brand exercise for me. I want to reposition the way people see me. And let's take Trump. Okay, Trump is a good example because he's far away across the pond for us here in the UK. So, what could he do to look a bit more like a soft, people person, as in like he's a cuddly, warm kind of guy, not very polarizing. No amount of brand awareness, brand building is going to change the perception of people and the delivery that he's had. So you got to almost stay. He can't go and change his message. So all he can do is continue repeating his message to the people that it works with, his target audience. And I think that's what I'm going to try and make it very practical for a takeaway for the audience is, inside your business, people know you as something. Don't try a brand building exercise about something that you're not. You must understand what that is and refine it and improve the delivery of it. That helps you also improve the brand building. And I think from a brand building, a strategy point of view, it's both internal, making sure that internally your staff, your employees, your people that work there, even your partners, maybe you outsource a lot of work, maybe you have suppliers, that everybody's on the same page in terms of the delivery and the customer journey through your business. And then you have a much better message to go and do brand building, because firstly, you understand who you are, and you know what your preemptive advantage is, and in terms of how people perceive you. Don't try and say you something that other people perceive you not to be, and then and then go out and tidy that up. And that would be my recommendation for 2023. I don't know, what do you think about that as a...
So yeah, I what you're saying is exactly right. And let me just take a step back to what I was saying before. Now, if we take the point that most marketers, or at least half of marketers, don't have an education in marketing, where they spend nearly all their time is in the communications segment of marketing. Now that's the end of the marketing chain. And it's exactly what you're saying. Look, the first and best lesson of marketing is leave your ego outside the door. Say to yourself, I know nothing about the customer, and most importantly, I as a marketer am not the customer. You must go and do proper research. If you don't do that, you are always guessing. If you don't spend your time doing research and finding out who your customer is inside out, then you will not be able to write an effective strategy. How could you possibly do that if you don't understand who you're trying to get to with the strategy? And most marketers are spending all their time, 90% of their time, at the communications end of marketing. They don't do any research, particularly in B2B, or they do little and ineffective research. They don't know what a strategy looks like, quite frankly. 90% of marketers don't know what a good strategy looks like. One of the best lessons I've had in strategy, it's not about what you do, it's about what you don't do. And you've got to be brutal in that. Look, it's better off you focus on one segment and do it really well than focusing on several segments and doing it all badly. The result you will get will be less. And particularly when you're constrained on resources. You have to do research. As a marketer, you should be spending 33% of your time on research you should be spending 33% of your time on strategy, and you should be spending 33% of the time, 0.3 recurring on all of them, on the tactical execution. If you're not doing that, you're making some significant mistakes, and you will always be known as the colouring in department, and you won't be involved in serious discussions with the CFO, with the head of product. Marketing should be central in a business. You know, people talk about marketing has changed so much over the last 20 years. People think marketing is digital. Let me just stop that now. Digital is a channel within marketing. It is not marketing. I'm not against digital. I think it's brilliant. But you have to understand it's a channel like any other. It's not marketing. Marketers should be involved in product, price, place, promotion. The 4 Ps of marketing are as important today as they were 100 years ago. And that is key. If you have no education in marketing, you don't know that. You don't understand that. You don't understand what contributes to a good strategy. You don't know what good research looks like. And I think a lot of marketers are frightened about doing research. They think it costs loads of money. You can do a brilliant piece of marketing research for 24K. And it will give you a strategy that is informed, that you're not guessing, and it will give you more effective tactical execution, which will bring dollars into the business, long-term and short-term. And that's so important. If you don't do the research and the strategy, you're always guessing. You can't have any serious conversations with anyone because you're basing it on nothing. I hear a lot of marketers talk to me about ROI, like it's the best thing. Listen, ROI is not a measurement of marketing effectiveness. ROI is a measure of marketing efficiency. And, you know, if I could leave your viewers with one thing today, the absolute best ROI I can achieve for you right now. Switch off your marketing spend and you'll have the best ROI. The best ROI is 0 marketing spend. So if you persistently focus on ROI as your key metric, then you're not building your business, you're not building your brand, and it's certainly not making any sense as a marketer. And you will always be at that 90% of marketers who spend all their time colouring in, talking about colours, talking about fonts, and never being involved.
And the logo.
And not adding any value because you're always guessing. And you see it time and again. And I've worked for startups, I've worked for scale-ups, I've worked for the most profitable company in the world. And at different parts of your growth journey requires different things. So if you're a startup, you need to be doing more short-term marketing, because if you don't bring any customers in, you're never going to be a viable brand, right? But you have to get that changeover right, that when you've got some customers, when you're becoming profitable, start building your brand. Otherwise, you'll end up with IBM syndrome, where you're the perpetual startup with no brand value, and you find out in a few years you're losing out. You know, when you want to sell a stake, or if you want to go to IPO, if you make it that far, your valuation isn't going to be what it could be. So, different points of the market and different types of organizations have a different long and short ratio of marketing they should be doing. So to just give you a quick example, because it's important, if you're in financial services, you should be doing 80% typically brand building and 20% short-term activation. For B2Bs, not consumer financial services, that looks more like 51% in brand building, 49% in sales activation. But there's an important point here. If you're selling in B2B and your sales cycle, your sales process is longer than a year, then you need to be doing about 80% brand building and 20% short term. And the reason for that is very simple. How do you know when someone's going to come to the market to buy your product if your sales cycle is 2 years? Yeah. And if you're just running short-term campaigns, they're not accretive like brand building is. So you turn it on, you turn it off. It goes back to 0. You turn it on, turn it off. If you have a long sales cycle, you need to make sure you're top of mind. That when people do come to market, you're one of the players in their head, and they say, actually, hang on, I've just seen that company's short-term banner advert on a website. I know them. they've built mental availability with me. I understand they're a good brand. I understand they've got good customers. I'm going to click on that banner and I'm going to download that piece of content. And then they're in the short end of the sales funnel and you've picked them up. And then you start in that short end of the funnel. And that's why it's important. When you're a startup, yeah, absolutely. More short term. As you grow, you've got to make sure you're moving into doing brand building as well. And if you look at all the statistics for marketing at the moment, marketers are becoming more short term, even though the evidence says absolutely that's not the thing you should be doing. They're becoming more short term. Most marketers, if I went across segments, they're spending 70% of their time and resources in short term marketing. So the ratio is the wrong way around. And if I look in B2B, and particularly in financial services, financial markets, what I see is that 80 or 90% of time and resources is spent in short-term marketing, and they're not doing any brand building, and it costs them daily down the line.
Yeah, but I think sorry to interrupt you, Thom, but I think the problem is that a lot of if you're sitting around the table and you're talking strategy and the what they call the KPIs and the OKRs and all these, the stats start coming up, and it's sort of like, what are the results for this week, this month, this quarter? What are your projections for next year? Because if you think about a bigger business, they have to say, all right, we thinking there's going to be a recession. Mr. Marketing Leader, tell us how much you think we will be earning in revenue-wise. What's the top line for that you can sort of estimate and predict for 2023? And we can only do planning based on what we think is the income. If you just look, governments have to balance their books. Companies have to balance their books. You can't spend more than you're earning. And the conversation starts with, how much do you think we're going to get next month, next year, next week? And I think that's why there's this short-term nature, is because it's all to do with, it ripples through the entire organization around planning. And you can't go and say, no, you know what, I'm going to do this big brand building exercise and we're only going to see the results in 4 years' time. The people around the boardroom are going to say, you know what, I actually don't think that's really where we need to go. I can understand a portion of what we're doing, but we need to probably balance that. So, and I'm guessing you hear those conversations all the time. I'd like to hear your input on that. Yep.
So going back to that measurement, and you've just nailed it, hit the nail on the head of why there is that short-termism. Of course, there's those pressures. If you're a listed company and you're reporting to the markets quarterly, then you want to be building revenue, right? You want to be building sales, profitability. So there is that short-termism, which is an issue. To take it back to marketing and brands, what you'll find is, marketers, through a combination of lack of education, not being au fait with the measurements that count, will count the measurements that are easy, right? So, I got this many click-throughs, the ROI was this, etc. You can count the value of long-term brand building. Of course you can. You can equate that. Yes, it's more complicated than the short end, but you can do that. What's your share of voice? What's your excess share of voice? There's a correlation, direct correlation between excess share of voice and your market share. And you can calculate these things if you're willing to do the research and spend the time on it and be a well-informed marketer. If you're not, then yes, you're always going to be the other end of that conversation. Oh, yeah, I'm asking you for the money, but I can't prove it. Nobody in their right mind is going to walk into a boardroom as a qualified, respected marketer and say they can't justify why they're asking for the money. Yes, there's ambiguity in marketing. You can't guarantee it. Of course, you can make projections like anything else. You work with your colleagues in sales and the rest of the business, the CFO. You have to, right? But let's take, some of my customers, your listeners, private equity companies. Great example. You buy a company, right? How long are you going to hold it for? What's the average? 5 years? 3 to 5 years? Okay. You buy it and then you want to sell it again. Maybe to another private equity company. Maybe you want to value it. if you're not taking a long-term view of your brand, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Because when you exit, you've left an awful lot on the table, I'm afraid to say. So if you're not willing to take a longer-term view as a business, then it will cost you. By all means, go short-term. But ultimately, you're probably going to stay round about where you are, and be reliant on not growing your brand equity, which is such an important part of the thing. Of course, different businesses in different parts of the sales cycle are going to suffer from that. But you can calculate long-term brand value and what you're adding to it and how you're growing that over a period of time. And it's not about starting and stopping like short-term marketing. Okay, your excess share of voice because you're putting more into the brand building might be this, and your market share might be that. But there's a lag effect. But once you've got to 2 or 3 years, it's catching up. And your market share has grown significantly. And you're moving ahead. And then you start to see the benefits of it. So yes, I mean, you can always take short term. There's always that pressure. But if you avoid the difficult conversations and just go down the easy route, I don't think you're doing your job very well. I don't think you're doing it properly. I certainly don't think you're adding a lot of value to your business.
Yeah, you make a very, very strong case, and I appreciate that. And I totally agree with you. So yes, there has to be a long-term vision and view of where you're going in terms of brand, where the market is going, how you're going to address the market. Because if you think, generations, I think again, this is just probably an observation more than probably a scientific fact, but my view of the 1900s, the 20th century is more around, the generations were longer. It almost felt like, it wasn't every 5 or 10 years there's a new generation. I mean, we went through the millennials, Gen Z, I mean, it's crazy. Just in 20 years, we've had multiple generations come through. And it's almost like that is shortening, and you have to be a lot more focused, because each one of those, and take TikTok as an example. TikTok brand-wise, if you think about it, initially it was just for kids. I mean, it was like, what are you? I wouldn't be seen dead looking at TikTok. Now there's TikTok for business. Now I think apparently it's one of the biggest search engines for people up to age 35 or something like that.
Yeah.
In terms of where they find their information, it's shifted so rapidly, where if you're not up to date with the way people are behaving, and your brand is not taking into account this constant shift, that you are already speaking to those audiences as early as possible, knowing that the relationship or the transaction will only really mature or occur at a later stage. Would you agree with that? I mean, I want to sort of get to another topic, but I just want to just round this one off quickly.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's very, products have life cycles that they go through, and the name of the game is, grow them as much as you can, and then maintain that maturity stage for as long as you can before you get the decline. Brands are long-term things, as we discussed, and products can be long-term, but they're on a cycle. I think, yes, things are moving much faster, but I think that makes the investment in the long term important as well. And I just want to clear up one thing, because again, it's a misconception. It's not about long and short term. It's about doing them both together. They work best when you do them both together. Higher profitability, sales, better valuations if you do them both together. It's not about one or the other. It's about doing them both together. I think, yes, things are moving faster, without a doubt, in the world we live in. But I think that makes the importance of your brand and creating longevity more so than ever before. But take a case in point, Facebook. Before Facebook, there was MySpace that lasted a few years. Facebook's been going, 20 years now? But it's starting to drop off, but they've made some mistakes with their brand and what they do. And just to be clear as well, if you're not fulfilling your brand and your promise with your products, then you can't maintain a strong brand. You have to do both together. That's what Apple companies like that do well and maintain that. But that importance of and trying to be relevant is really important. I think you see that, car companies are a good example. They market to young people, knowing full well that they're not necessarily going to buy a car from them right now. It might be in 20 years' time, but they know once they get them that's very sticky. And I think that's important. Clearly, it differs in different segments. B2B is very different. People have a career and then they retire, okay? And they don't buy your products anymore because they're no longer in business. Of course, you have to have that mindset, but are you making sure that you're speaking to the next generation who's come through? If you're not doing that, then again, you're going to have that problem. Your customers, you want them to be advocates in a business, because in B2B, you're usually selling to a buying committee, right? And the guy who uses the product might not be the guy who signs the check.
That's right.
Part of that buying committee. So you have to turn people into advocates for you. You have to know who that buying committee is and influencing them, and have the different levers that influence them and what you show them. But ultimately, that message needs to join together when that buying committee meets, that you're the best solution for them. I think it's a really key point in B2B.
Yeah, from an example point of view, I mean, it can, and I suppose one wants to sort of have a few takeaways, which I'm going to ask you to have now, because we're at that stage of the podcast. But if I just think about companies like Microsoft, and let's take Sage, for instance. There was a stage where they would give away, say, student free software to schools, to educational institutions. Sage was very, very good at that at one stage. They stopped doing that, and you could see where they are right now. They're probably like 3 or 4% of the global market. Sage have lost their traction in terms of, they invested a lot in the upcoming generations, if you like. Microsoft has done the same. They still do that. They still get involved in educational institutions, making sure they have very, very low price entry points for schools and students and that to get involved. Because what happens? It's very sticky. You get involved in the software, and eventually you become a senior within an organization, and then you buy everything that Microsoft has to offer, all the way up to Azure and all that type of thing, and I suppose you could go and have a look at some of the other products too. But just as an example, so in terms of a lifetime value or lifetime engagement, if you can get that early on enough, and that's that brand exercise. And I wanted to try and just give a few basic examples so people can get a sense of what does it mean to go out of your way to give away some free stuff or engage early, even if it's educational content. If you're B2B, why aren't you out there doing things that will help, but doesn't necessarily bring money in right now? But in 5 and 10 years' time, those people that you're helping will eventually be the leaders of the organization. So
I think that's so important. And let me give you an example. So, I've worked for a few exchanges in my time. And, one of the things that we always used to run at the exchange that I've worked at was going into schools and universities and, offering education on trading and markets. Now, as an exchange, these people you want them to go and work for banks. They're not going to work directly for you. It's an indirect play. But if they work for a bank as a trader, that brings volume onto your exchange, right? So you're trying to engage the younger generation and trying to get them to come along. You're building brand goodwill. They remember who you are. But you're also building the potential to have increased market. And, if I took trading in the US market, for instance, financial services and trading markets used to be like the big industry, right? Everybody wants to get into trading because you make lots of money and it's a glamorous lifestyle. And then the tech companies came along, and traders now are more like computer programmers. And the financial markets were losing out because actually if I went to Google, they'd pay me more money and I'd be doing different stuff. And it felt like more of a purposeful career, I suppose, than after the financial crisis and some of the scandals within financial markets. So exchanges realized that they needed to start more investment into schools, into universities, teaching people about trading, teaching people about a career in financial markets. And, you know, over a period of 10 years, they start to see the benefit of that. Yes, they might not work for the exchange. They might go and work for one of the exchange's customers, but the incremental value of dollars actually comes back to the exchange. So I think that's a really important part of brand is doing good things. I think a lot of brands at the moment get lost in purpose, and they feel like their purpose should be everything about the brand. You know, the ESG is such a big thing at the moment. Look, most things in ESG you should be doing anywhere as a good company, right? That's not going to differentiate your brand because most other people are saying they're doing the same things. So, and marketers at the moment are getting confused. Companies are getting confused. Yes, there's a place for purpose within brand, but it's not what your company is. Because if you do that, then you're probably going to make it like everybody else, and do the same things. But I think that, you know, that's really important. I think that investment and going into different places. I love Sage. I come from Newcastle. Sage is a Newcastle company. But yeah, I think, you know, once you stop trying to build your market share, stop trying to build your brand, ultimately it's going to cost you down the line, which is what we've been talking about through this podcast. I think, you know, that's a huge part of it. And I think it's an important part of your marketing mix and how you go about executing what you're doing.
Yeah, and maybe Sage is a good example, because I see they're trying now to reposition the brand again. I think they're putting in a lot, and I remember when they tried to launch this as an idea, and it took a very long time. I think they tried to launch it in 2015, 2016. What you see in the tube in London, if you look on bus stops, you know, you see wherever you see Sage now, they have like free business advice and all that kind of thing. And I mean, I'm just using an example. So they're trying to reposition themselves not as a software company, but as a business tool. But that's a long process, and it's almost like it's very, very late to the game. This activity they're doing right now is costing them a lot. They are spending it through a very uncertain time. Yet it will probably pay off theoretically in the next 10 years for them, not now, immediately. Because there have been a lot of competitors that have eaten up their market space.
Yeah, and I think you know, that's a good example of what we were talking about before, about taking your foot off the gas for whatever reason. And you know, a lot of companies, when you talk about repositioning, it's a huge thing, right? And does your repositioning make sense? You know, a lot of the companies I go and work in, when they've lost their way, when they're asking me to look at their brand, do you know what I do? I go back and I look at their founders. I read stuff. I talk to the sales guys who've been there for years, and get back to what made the company successful. There's a lot of companies trying to do different things. Yes, okay, your customers may change. It might change. That's more of a product issue. But what made your brand successful? What made people like it and love it, right? And those things draw on that brand heritage you built up. It costs you a lot of money to do it.
I recall the Nokia phone. If you think, I mean, I just bought Nokia. It was just for me the best thing since ever. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. And that's poor decision making, as they try to move too far away from their core.
Yeah, and I think, you know, they missed out. And you know, Apple came along and they came up with something completely different. And it knocked everybody for six, and it was catch up after that. And if I may, just very quickly, let me address a misconception that I hear all the time, particularly in fintechs and tech marketing. They love to quote Steve Jobs. They like to dress like him as well, but they like to quote him. And you know what they say to me is, "Oh, I've seen the Steve Jobs videos. market research is no good. That's not what Steve Jobs said. What Steve Jobs said with the iPhone was, if you're launching something that is a complete innovation, yes, market research. How could somebody tell you about something that they don't yet know about? Okay. But what Steve Jobs also said is, once you've launched those products and they've been out in the market, then marketing customer research is very important. But people continually tell me, oh, Steve Jobs said market research is rubbish.
No,
And they totally misunderstand the lesson. He's 100% right. If you come up with an innovation like the iPhone no one's ever seen before, of course you can't do market research. That's just common sense.
Yeah, I think the other one that's often quoted is Tesla, for instance. You know, one of the key features that people buy is the fact that it can park itself, the car. You know, that you can just, you know, self-park. And there was sort of a market need that's not been addressed by any car maker, where you have most people, you know, struggle to do a parallel park, especially in very tight, narrow roads, etc. And if you can just press a button and the car will park itself, I mean, that in itself is just absolutely brilliant. So, you know, that was a market need that was addressed with you know, without really market research, but understanding, stepping back entirely. Let's wrap up, and Thom, I want to give you the opportunity, maybe just a few takeaways. Let's look at 2023. What's, like, from a marketing leader's point of view, like, what are the things you think people should be concentrating on? And then if you could add for me about you, sort of what do you do and how can people get hold of you to sort of get some of your expertise and advice?
Yeah. So, you know, looking ahead to 2023, look, it's going to be a difficult year. My advice, without knowing the listener's business, is try and maintain your spend in marketing. Try and do some market research. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just try and get some done. Take a pragmatic approach to it. Try and do a decent strategy. Go and find out what that is, and then put that into your tactical execution. Try and position yourself to come out of 2023 as best you can with the resources you have. If you've got marketers in the business or you're marketing yourself, you make sure you're educating yourself consistently. Keep doing that. It's really important. There's brilliant stuff out there, but it's important you do it. It's important you get the right education. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't. If you keep building your brand, you will come out of 2023 faster, better than your peers that don't, and you can position yourself well for it. But make sure you understand your customers. Make sure you develop a strategy. I think that's really critical, and be pragmatic in it. If you're a small business, you're not going to do the stuff that a big FMCG can do. If you're a small B2B scaling up, just look at what you can do and implement that. Stop guessing. Start trying to inform yourself, and you will be more successful. Try and take a longer term view where you can. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, and then just tell us a little bit about sort of what are you doing at the moment, and how can people get hold of you? Tell us sort of what do you offer? I mean, if someone gets hold of you.
Yeah, so I do everything from startups to the world's most profitable company. I can help you with your brand and how you structure it. I can help you with your marketing, about all the things we talked about today, to make you more profitable, to make your marketing more efficient and more effective. I can help you with communications too. So if you have any PR issues, whether it's crisis or whether it's how do I get out there, and PR is an important part of brand building, and it's often one that is cheap to do that has a long-term effect. I can help you with that. You know, I work for the most profitable company in the world. I wrote their media strategy for the biggest IPO that is taken onto a market so far in history. So I have a very high level understanding of what a good media strategy looks like, and working with very big brands or very small brands from a startup through the scale up. If you want to get a hold of me, best place to find me is LinkedIn. You can look at my experience. You can see some of the comments that people have made about the work I do and how I operate. If I could put myself into a nutshell, I'm a no-nonsense I'm not big on corporate talk. I like to get straight to the point. When you're a consultant, I believe that saves you quite a bit of money.
Love it. And it's been a fascinating conversation, Thom.
Yeah, thank you, Dudley. I really appreciate you inviting me on, and you've asked excellent questions, and I hope I've given your viewers some things to think about and some value.
No, I think it's been absolutely brilliant. I'm going to just say goodbye to everyone, but I want to have a quick chat to you afterwards.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're watching a recording of this, please make sure that you subscribe and like, and even share the video and the recording. I'm sure there are some golden nuggets, depending on your industry, depending on where you come from, and how you viewing 2023, looking ahead in the next 12, 13, 14 months. We closing off the year. I mean, we've gone into November already. Can you believe 2022 is almost done? We're on the fourth quarter of 2022. This is the time to dust off of the old goals and let's call it the planning and the predictions that you're going to make, and then just taking into account all the uncertainty, and then saying, you know what, I'm going to take hold and take charge of how I'm going to manage my year next year, and how am I going to take it into 4 different quarters. What am I going to do with Q1 in terms of January through February and March? How do I want Q1 to end? How do I want Q2 to end? And look at a 12-month plan, and then break it down into what you can. And we have spoken about short-termism, but at this stage, there is definitely value in building that joint approach. And what can I do now to build revenue, but also to make sure that I'm not destroying the brand equity that I should be building. I'm not just trying to survive, but I'm also building out in terms of what happens in 2024, 2025. How's my market changing? If you're a small business or an entity that maybe is a mid-sized company that's maybe more geographically bound, maybe you want to get involved more in the community. You want to be giving back and talking to the future leaders of your client companies. If you're in the B2B environment, or if you're in a consumer-based environment, you might want to be doing things online and being more educational, providing a lot of expertise up front and for free maybe, or even having methods of getting your message and your brand out there. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for watching the recording, if you're watching the recording, and please join us on the next episode. We have regular episodes. We live stream and we record these, and it ends up on both on a recorded format in YouTube and so on, and then also in an audio format on all your favorite podcast audio channels. So all the best. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you on the next episode.